As a guy with well over 100 boots and videos about boots, I'm more aware than most people how unbelievably complicated the buying process can be. But I also have a lot of friends who very regularly ask me for like tips on how they can pick a boot. So I'm also pretty good at breaking it down to get really simple criteria that I think can be useful for anyone. So I'm talking about 5 things to keep in mind when looking for a pair of boots. So number 1, of course, is the leather. But I think a lot of people get this wrong because the usual advice you get is to get full grain leather. And what full grain is supposed to mean is that the outer layer of the leather hasn't been sanded down or corrected, which is meant to mean you're getting more durable leather that's going to age nicely. It's a fine rule of thumb, but the thing is no one is actually controlling the term full grain, and it's used a lot on leathers that have indeed been corrected. Unless you can really see the grain, like the skin sort of pores of the animal, it's been corrected a little bit. A really popular example is Horween's Chrome XL. It's about the most beloved boot leather there is. It's on this pair of Vibergs here, and this is smooth leather. Horween is indeed corrected a little bit, even though it's often called full grain leather. So I don't think full grain really gives you the full picture here because a lot of people just throw that term around. For me personally, what I look for first is the tannery that makes it. There are a lot of bad leathers out there. I recently looked at some Beckett Simonons. They don't tell you what tannery it's from, and you can tell it's very cheap leather. A good list of tanneries to get: Horween in Chicago. This is CF Stead, that's in England. Badlassi Carlo in Italy. Lafarque down in Mexico. All these guys make really good leather. I also look for brands like Tannery Dupuis, Maverick, Seidel. These are all really good tanneries as well. Basically, you want the company to be forthcoming with where the leather comes from, right? That to me is a better sign of how good quality the leather is. In addition to that, there's plenty of leathers like Rough Out here, or even this suede here, that are still very good quality and very hard wearing, even though they're not technically full grain. I would say look for the tannery, and then if they don't have that, then look for the term full grain, which is like pretty good at telling you that it's gonna be okay leather anyway. Number 2 is transparency. They don't tell you either what kind of leather it is, or where the leather's from, or where the boot is made, or how it's made, then I kind of feel like they're trying to hide something. A good example here is Portland leather. This boot is everywhere on Instagram and everything. This is called the Breaker boot, and this boot is a good looking boot, but on their website, on the product page, they don't tell you this is cemented construction, which means it can't be resold. Now, if they were forthcoming with that, I wouldn't have a problem with it because it is a very inexpensive boot and the price does match the quality of the boot. But when they're not telling you these sorts of things, like they're not really forthcoming with either how it's made or where it's made, that sets off some alarm bells for me. So I want transparency from the company as well. On that note about the cemented construction of Portland boots, number 3, you want to look for resoleability. And for a lot of people, that's the number 1 thing to look for, and there's a very good reason for that. A resoleable boot, of course, means that you get more longevity and durability out of it because you don't have to toss it out when the sole eventually wears down. So the gold standard for this is Goodyear welts. This machine actually replaced hand welting, which takes a really long time. I've done it myself. Goodyear welting is a machine that makes for a boot that is resoleable, long story short. So it's the most common kind of resoleable construction. It's also very water resistant. So you want to look for something that says Goodyear welt on it like that. There's also some other ones like Stitch Down can be resoled. Blake stitches can also be resoled. You should just note that Stitch Down and Blake Stitch, those are harder to get resoled. They can be done, but there's a good chance you'll have to mail your boots away to get resoled if they are anything other than a Goodyear welt down. But you should still get those boots. Those are still good quality and they still can be resoled. Just a bit more inconvenient to get resoled. The 4th thing I look for is a shank. So a shank is a hard piece of material that is typically inserted underneath the insole in the boot. It goes from the heel to the midfoot. You stick it here, and the idea behind that is that a shank, which is usually steel, but sometimes it's like fiberglass or wood or even very stiff vegetable tan leather, a shank helps to increase the stability of the boot. So it keeps it from moving independently, the heel and the forefoot. And shanks are really important. A lot of people find when you're spending a lot of time on your feet, they help to reduce foot pain and even like knee pain, hip pain, back pain as well from spending all day on your feet. This is an element that a lot of people don't think about, especially when they're younger and especially when they've worn sneakers all the time. But a reason why boots are so common and popular among people who spend all day on their feet is that because of that extra stability that is largely conferred by the shank, there are some other elements, but a shank will again help to improve stability and reduce foot pain over time. There is an asterisk there. When a boot has a wedge sole, like a flat one like this, people will often not include a shank in there because you don't have like the heel and the forefoot on really separate bits. It's flat here. So this is plenty stable enough without a shank. That said, this company here, Grant Stone, they put a shank in here anyway, because I do know some people that say even when it's a wedge sole, they can tell when there's no shank, especially as it wears down with wear. That's a kind of a more niche view that some people think a wedge sole should have a shank anyway. But a general rule of thumb is if it's got a heel, it should have a shank. If it doesn't, it may be not quite such a big deal. And the last thing I look for in the construction is leather, like a leather insole or midsole midsole or outsole, but I want at least one layer of leather in there. A lot of the boots that I really like, you've got a leather insole and midsole and outsole. A lot of people don't like leather outsoles, but my point is some brands will experiment with the insoles and midsoles, right? So for instance, while classically boots are just leather insole, midsole, outsole, a lot of purists really like that. Some brands like Thursday, they'll experiment with like an EVA foam insole, which is something you'll find more in sneakers. It helps to absorb shock better, but they'll still have a leather midsole there. Then there are other brands that they'll have a leather insole, but they'll have like a leather midsole, like Red Wing, for instance. They do that on their mock toes. But what I want is a layer of leather in there, whether it's the insole or the midsole, because that molds well to the shape of the foot over time and helps to produce a more custom fit as you wear the boots. Because a big benefit of boots, among many, is that the more you wear them, the better they fit. So the most uncomfortable day in a pair of boots is your first day in them. And then as time goes on, everything gets activated by the heat of your foot. There are heat activated counters in a lot of them, and you sink into that leather, and that helps to create a shoe that's more comfortable and also better at reducing foot pain, and also just fits your foot better as the whole leather molds around the shape of your foot. So while you typically want a leather upper or suede or something, I want a leather insole or midsole to help with that comfort over time. So when people want to know like the basic things to look for in quality boots, yeah, that's my list. So number one is the leather quality. Typically I go to the tannery before I go for the words full grain, but if you can't get the tannery, full grain's fine. I want transparency from the company. I want the boots to be resoleable. I want some leather in the sole construction somewhere, and I want a shank in it if there's a heel, because that helps with the comfort and stability over time. And that's it. So let me know what you think. If you have any rules that apply to any and all boots that you would buy, because getting a list that applies to all of them is kind of tough. Let me know in the comments below if you've got any tips yourself, and happy boot buy. I've got a list of the best boots up here as well that you can check out. And I've also got plenty of stuff on like best Chelseas and best mock toes, whatever kind of style you're after as well. I'll put those all in the description below, and I hope this video was helpful. Stick around and subscribe for more stuff on casual stuff that lasts a long time. That's what this whole channel is all about.